so Joseph, always trying to do the right thing, and of course having God's blessing behind him, it just did. And he didn't worry about anything. Why? Because God was behind it. God was there. And that's what we all need in our lives, for God to be with us and to bless us and help us through every struggle that we have. And so he didn't concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. That is, he would choose what foods he would eat and what he didn't want to eat and those kind of things. That was a very personal thing. Of course, his wife as well. But here was the kind of person he was. Then it makes just kind of a statement about Joseph. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. You know, everybody who looked at him said, well, there's somebody that's really a good person and somebody that looks very, very good. And it came about after these events that the master's wife, his master's wife, well, looked with desire at Joseph. Well, he was handsome in form and appearance. And so it could be that her husband had been away some, he had a lot of duties for Pharaoh. So there would be times when he'd be away. And so what happened? Here was a situation where all of a sudden she said, well, I would sure like to have him next to me. And it came, so she looked at desire with Joseph and she said, lie with me. Well, of course, for them to lie with each other would mean that there would be action that would be sinful and wrong, sexual behavior. But he refused. He said no. And he said to his master's wife, behold, with me around, my master doesn't concern himself with anything in the house, and he puts all that he owns in my charge. And he says, there is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. Now look at the question he asks. He says, how then could I do this great evil and sin against God? Joseph loved God, and God had been good to him. And even though he was in a strange land, I don't know whether he could speak Egyptian or not. I'm sure he learned the language eventually. And he had to learn a new language, had to be around strangers. His brothers hated him. He was away from his father. He had no protection. He had no one with him except God. And you know what? There may come a time in your life when you have nobody with you but God. But if you put your faith and your trust in him, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. And that's what Joseph was doing. And he will make your path straight. He'll bless you. He'll be with you. And that'll be a comfort to you. And that's what he did this for. I think about this. He says to her, how then could I do this great evil and sin against God? You know, when you sin, it not only hurts yourself, it hurts the people you sin against, it hurts God every time. When you sin against God, there are always complications there. And you know what? It affects your conscience and how you view yourself. A lot of people think, oh, I can sin and it's no big deal. But you know what? When you love God, sin is a big deal. You can't just ignore it. You can't just not think about it and think it's going to go away. It's not going to happen like that. It just doesn't happen. I think about someone who was tempted in a great way and he fell to the temptation. In fact, he didn't just sin once, he sinned many times, and that would be David. And you remember David, whenever he was found out, when Nathan the prophet said, well, you know, you're the one who did this terrible thing that you did, how it affected his conscience and how he looked at himself. When you sin against God, you sin against yourself. Psalm 51, verse 3. Look at the things that are said there. Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion. Blot out my transgressions. That's what he called for. Don't you wish that we could have our transgressions blotted out? Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions. His conscience pricked him. And my sin is ever before me. He couldn't rid himself of what he had done. Against you and you only I have sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you're justified when you speak and blameless when you judge. Oh my. He really thought about that. He says in verse 6, behold, you desire truth in the innermost being, and in the hidden part you will make me know wisdom. He wants us to be honest with ourselves and see things as they really are in the inner man. And then he cries out, purify me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness, and let the bones which you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. And then he says, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain me with a willing spirit. He wanted something better than a guilty conscience. And Joseph didn't have a guilty conscience because he hadn't done anything wrong and didn't do anything wrong. And yet he's going to suffer even for doing the right thing. He refused. No, I'm not going to do this great evil and sin against God. Well, it came about that as she spoke to Joseph day after day, just like Delilah was day after day after Samson, and Samson gave in and told everything that was in his heart. Well, day after day, she was after him. And it was a terrible thing, but it says that he didn't listen to her, to lie beside her or be with her. He kept saying no, I'm not going to do this. And so it happened one day, he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was there inside. Nobody. So she caught him by the garment. She grabbed a hold of him, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled, and he went outside. He wasn't willing to do it, but she had his garment. Yeah, he left his garment in her hand. My, oh my. Well, that garment was a bit of proof, at least for the lie that she was going to tell. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them, see, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport, that is to flirt and to be sexually inclined, to make sport of us. And he came in to me to lie with me. No, she was the seducer, not him. He came in here to lie with me, and I screamed. Now we have to understand about the scream. For her to scream meant that she was opposed to whatever was going to take place. Well, she didn't scream whenever she had a hold of him. She may have said she screamed, but that scream did not take place. And it came about when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, that he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. So there she had two things that she thought were evidence that she had been made sport of, that he was the guilty party and had come in after her, when in truth, she was the one who did what was wrong. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Yeah, she was going to show him that garment. And then she spoke to him with these words, that Hebrew slave that you brought. Now she's going to blame him for bringing the guy in. You see, this is part of it. That slave whom you uh, brought to us, well, he came into me to make sport. This phrase "to make sport," you remember whenever Isaac and Rebekah, that they were kind of caught making sport with each other. It's the same kind of thing where they are flirting and being close to each other and that kind of stuff. Well, now she's accusing Joseph of wanting to make sport of me. And it happened as I raised my voice and screamed. Oh, here we have the garment, now the scream, that he left his garment beside me and fled outside. Well, my oh my. Here was Joseph who said no from the first, who remained close to God. He avoided sin, but she lied. She lied from start to finish. There was no scream. Now, yes, she had his garment, but that's because she wasn't going to let go of it. Then verse 19, now it came about that when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, this is what your slave did to me, that his anger burned. Because he had had such trust in Joseph. And for Joseph to do this made him angry. Of course, Joseph didn't really do that. She lied about it. She lied about those things. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail. Now, he didn't kill him. He could have done that, but he didn't kill him. What he did is he put him in the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. Oh my. Now here's a fella, bless his heart, he'd seen some dreams and he had a coat of many colors. His brother hated him. They sold him into slavery. He rose real high. Somebody lied about him, made the master angry at him. He got thrown into prison. Oh. And so Joseph's master took him, put him in the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in jail. Don't you know that was a sad boy that day? But verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph. And even on the saddest day of your life, the hardest day of your life, the Lord will be with you. He will bless you. He'll be close to you.